noem Frank Mahmoud. Hey, Frank.
Ido, I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, you can hear me then, yes?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. So nice to see you, Frank.
Yeah, good. Hi, John. Can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good
I can hear
afternoon.
you good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So see you.
Hi, Frank.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. So when you start, I'll give you the slide control so that you can control the slide by yourself.
Alternatively, you can just control them on your side.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
There's no, since you're more conversant with the system, it's better to control them on your
Okay.
side.
That also
Okay.
works. Just say next.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just give the the normal words next or on to the next slide.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, sure.
Is Eric back from his engagement?
Yes, and he should be here soon. I'm not sure if the attendees hear us, Frank. Do we have to let people in, or it happens automatically?
I think, yeah, now I started the webinar, so automatically
Great.
they are here. Yeah. It's Eric that he has to join and we have to promote him to a panelist, but he's not joined yet. So,
Let's wait a couple.
okay, Eric is here now.
So I think Rick has declined promotion, Frank. No, he's okay. He's there. Yes. Okay.
Vito, do you want to start?
Yes, I can introduce and perhaps give the platform to Tumani, and then I think we will move to Eric. Yeah, welcome everyone for making the time to attend this webinar from EPIC Africa. And we have two speakers today. Our first speaker, Tumani John, comes from actually is a researcher in a sister project called One Planet, focusing on the East African community and how climate action commitments um, such as national adaptation plans and national NDCs can be harmonized with development priorities, and he will give a talk on that. And I have my colleague Eric Leijs from within EPIC Africa, who will be speaking about nexus governance and policy coherence and how coordination can be done. So with that in mind, I will ask Tumani to briefly introduce himself and move to his talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Tumaini John. I'm a PhD candidate at IHE Delft and University of KwaZulu-Natal, and also the University of United Nations Institute for Water. Basically, my PhD is based within studying the climate action and adaptation and mitigation actions under the United Nations for framework for climate change, basically put as NDCs, nationally determined cooperation contributions, and NAPs, national adaptation plans. And today we will run through a synopsis of some of the work we've done in two basins in the East Africa region and in the Southern Africa Development Corporation. And the talk I'm giving today is based on a publication that we've done with together with my team. And yeah, that's me. And basically on to our webinar for today. We will start by looking at what is the water, energy, food nexus perspective. Next slide, please. So in this webinar, we have hoping to discuss how water, energy, food nexus can or is forming a foundational approach to evaluate governance and policy interlinkages, and specifically focusing on understanding if such an approach can help us understand whether the national determined contributions and national adaptation plans and regional development plans form any type of interlinkages, and we will look at the context of the riparian states of the Lake Victoria Basin. Next, please. So I would wish to start with I see we still have we want to do a small quiz on the NDCs actually. So I invite you to scan this code and help us with answering the question, are NDCs interlinked or with development or with management of shared resources? Kindly take a minute or a second, not a minute, and give us your feedback. There's no right or wrong answer. This is all an engagement and essentially to want to know how we view or our perspectives on understanding about climate action and water, energy, and food nexus resource demands. Frank, we can give it some time for people to scan. Yes, see, we are joining. Please scan. I only see we have 6 players. We have 6 participants.
And 6 players have signed up. Let's see.
Yeah, so I think that's a good, yeah. So please submit your answer to this question. Are national determined contributions, or NDCs, and regional development, in your opinion, interlinked in a context of the Lake Victoria Basin? Of course, if you're not familiar with the basin, we wouldn't have enough time to tell you more about the basin, but we will have a short summary of the key characteristics of the basin. So highly, and as you can see, my timekeeper or my referee is saying the time is up. So please feel free, even if the time is up, you can still submit. You can still submit your responses, and we will reflect on this towards the end of the slides. Next one, Frank, please. So let's start from the concept of the water, energy, food nexus. So essentially, we look at water, energy, and food nexus from a broad perspective where we have water, land, and food. And basically, these 3 broad sectors contribute to critical intersections that then inform the types of interactions, whether it's economic, social, hydrological. And this creates certain interlinkages which can be explored in different types of nexuses, where we have the main, which is based on a paper done by in 2011 that argues that water, energy, and food, or water, energy, and agriculture, as the core pillars of the water, energy, and food nexus. However, this can be extrapolated in different scenarios, such as you can have water, energy, nutrition, water health, human health, meaning there are different variations and changes that can be put depending on specific schools and disciplines. And all these contribute to critical intersections between cooperation, climate action, political organizations, and can basically be divided into either environmental drivers, where we are looking at biodiversity. This also can be understood from a development perspective, where we're looking at sustainable development, or exploitation of shared resources in a certain development-oriented way. And they can also contribute to societal approaches, meaning movement between communities and interactions between communities and ecosystems. Next one, please. So from the current status of the NDCs, national frameworks, which are expressions of intentions by nations to lower emissions or to reduce the amount of emissions from the interactions on developments between water, energy, and food sectors. And at the current state, these are just expressions and are rather very hard to be enforced. So we are having commitments that are in the current form of low ambitions and low effectiveness, yet we are living in an extreme, a period of extreme weather events, which can be described or has been described as climate change. And then domestically, nations or plans have to be developed either to substitute or reduce the vulnerability of communities. And this then becomes the national medium and long-term adaptation needs, whereby a country, for example, if it's in a highly arid and semi-arid region invest in expansion of agriculture. So essentially that ends up having extreme conditions, high exploitation of available resources, and that makes the NDC's ambitions almost very unrealistic when we look at it from a practice approach. However, the idea of the NDC's, the UNFCCC framework is transition from the current NDC status, which is low in ambition and low in effectiveness, towards a higher effectiveness, meaning we have ambitions, nations have ambitions that are incorporated in development approaches, and they are interlinked with social movements or drivers, and also environmental drivers. And then essentially, by doing this, we will the goal is to achieve high effectiveness in climate action and high ambition, meaning will in the long run, in the long term, the idea is to achieve a status where the amount of development or the degree to which development is done does not harm environment, but also the amount of development that is done also aligns with the needs of progressively increasing population. Next one, please. So then we go back to the Lake Victoria Basin, where we looked at the riparian states, meaning the states that share the Lake Victoria asset. And this is one of the most populous basin in East Africa, with approximately 210 million inhabitants, with Burundi having a share of 7% of the Lake Victoria Basin, Kenya 22%, then Tanzania and Uganda as shown. And the main drivers of development and also emissions is pollution from industrial and domestic use. So this means that these nations are aggressively or actively involved in development approaches to help provide resource securities, meaning food, energy, water, work. But then what this means is it ends up exacerbating the amount of emissions, and then essentially we have a scenario where there is a trade-off between the needs for food, and then we have also the high emission rates. And this has been seen. What we are seeing is there has been an approximate of 70 to 80% forest loss in the last decade in this particular riparian area, favoring or due to increased infrastructural development. Next one, please. So what then this does, it sets the stage for what we argue is a nexus governance matrix, whereby we have contextual drivers. On the first part of it, since it's a highly populated area, there is high population pressure on the available resources. So therefore, governments have multi-dimensional infrastructure development programs as a response to reduce or to maximize how effectively the need for water, need for food is managed. So then the catalyzing reason for this coordination is that if it is development coordination orientation, then we create economic growth through incentivization of either agriculture, energy expansion, and then this response to the macro, meaning the larger regional needs for food, regional needs for reliable energy, larger macro need for water and sanitation. And ideally, the driving force of this becomes, then we have very stable energy production, for example, in Kenya, which has a very high energy production capacity of green energy that contributes to having sustainable energies for transport and food production. But then these all contributes to, on one side, strengthening cooperation, but then creates a critical governance system whereby we have institutions at the local, at the national level, whereby these institutions are responsible for setting regulations, and then these regulations create norms whereby we have, for example, when there is competition between food for energy, water for food and water for energy, then there are standards that have to be regulated by a national institution to ensure that there's enough food or balance between water for food and water for energy. But then the trade-off here then becomes, if it is a regional riparian basin, then there is a risk of hegemony, meaning one nation could potentially become a source of unnecessary competition or cutthroat competition. For example, if a nation is into exclusive exploitation of water for energy. Next one, please. So what we have engaged in the last 2 years was to try and understand how these aspects play in practice in the Lake Victoria Basin. And theoretically, what I've been talking about in the past slides is there is the theoretical understanding of how these different sectors are interconnected. But then when we zoomed into the riparian, into the analytical dimensions, we found out that we have basically two approaches. On one side, we have practitioner practices, and on the other side, we have the theoretical policy and governance context, the policies that are set at the national level. So from the practitioner level, this is where the multi-governance systems come into play, meaning that in practice, the authorities, for example, in the Lake Victoria Basin, an authority that is responsible for water circulation will most likely perform a task that is policy-wise a national task. But then this creates the practice and governance action areas. So in the policy action areas, this is where the actual nexus coherence happens, where the national policy does not necessarily determine how nations interact on day-to-day management, meaning we have substantive policy goals, meaning, for example, a goal that aims to reduce energy inequality. But then during the grassroots or at the grassroots level, priority is given and determined by a local player or an authority that does not necessarily have the policy rights and authorities given at the national level. Then this creates the linkages that we are seeing as the entry point to translate national commitments, which are expressions, to lower grassroots demands, then that are implemented to impact emissions, to impact commitments to green energy and others. Next, please. So how does it look then between in practice in terms of water, energy, and food nexus, climate action, and the development in the Lake Victoria Basin, again in the riparian states? So from the preliminary results, we found that the nexus gains, meaning the benefits of a nexus approach, is development, whereby there is development of either expansion of agriculture or expansion of infrastructure for road and energy, which creates strong institutional and socio-economic systems. But then in practice, if you increase the land required for agriculture, then it increases water competition, meaning there will be water use conflicts between agricultural expansion and energy generation and transport. And then also then it means that if a basin is vulnerable to extreme weather events, then we have increased risk of social and institutional tipping points. If it's in a case of extended drought, for example, and the water levels are low, then there is almost an imminent risk of how to prioritize, how to synchronize, and know when and where to prioritize in terms of what is the immediate need, what is priority number one for the basin, and if there is no priority number one for the whole basin, then what happens in terms of resolutioning problem of high demand with low availability of resources. Next, please. And this is what we have seen so far, is that the interlinkages between NDCs, NPs, and regional development plans, although they are there, they are very inconsistent and are not aligned in practice, meaning they often compete for the similar resource, which is either not there or insufficient. So then the most important way to mitigate this is to first start at a national scale of having policy coherence, which is then meaning a scale down from the basin level to a national level at every nation, understand how internally the policies are aligned, what are the policy objectives, what are the policy goals, and this Dr. Eric will expound more because of the nature of his work. And then when you have this national policy coherence understood, then you create a good base for institutional coordination, meaning it creates the robustness to either scale up, scale down, go horizontal or vertical, depending on the current status or on the current pressure at hand. And then what then the WEF Nexus approach contributes. In our research, we have done several content analyses and also qualitative and quantitative trend resource used in this basin, and we have we argue that the Nexus approach will contribute to solving or contribute to aligning policy coherence at the national level. And this creates alignment at the institutional level in terms of instruments, meaning if there is policies and also there is tools such as models, tools such as policy frameworks, and then these then galvanizes cooperation for the long-term climate action and development ambitions. Next one, please. And to those interested further to see what we have been doing in this area, please kindly take a second, also scan this QR code. It will redirect you to some of the research outputs achieved in our project, One Planet. And the last slide is also another slide that we are very open to receiving or anonymous, or if you want, you can still not make them not anonymous. And we will be coordinating with Prof. Edo, Frank, and the rest to respond to to all your queries or recommendations. And yes, thank you for having us today.
Please, I mean, if you raise your hand, of course, you can ask directly to Tumani. You can pose your question or comment. But if you feel easier to write it in, please also do the same. So I can pose it to Tumani. Thank you, Tumani, for this talk. Does anyone have a question or a comment for Tumani? Please raise your hand. If not, I will. So I see Amin. Amin, please feel free to ask your question or comment. Put forward your comment.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I mean.
Great to meet you, and thank you very much for the exciting presentation to Mine. So I'm a master student of engineering and policy analysis at TU Delft, and I am kind of involved with the project, ongoing project with EPIC Africa, mostly considering how multi-level governance could be meet or adopted in Web Nexus study in EPIC African project. And my case study probably gonna be the Kenya and Tana River Basin. So I understood that you had a very similar matching with my conceptualization with the EPIC Africa project, and I would kind of like to know how is your project line with your maybe PhD, if I understood correctly, is adapted or matched with the EPIC Africa context, and to what extent do you know about the ongoing objectives in that particular project with EPIC Africa and the team and partners with EDO? This really clarifies because I can see very similarities between your project line and there, but I'm not sure that if you are also really connected to that or not.
Okay. Maybe we reserve that question if anybody else that's more of a clarification question. Anyone has a question for Tumani? Okay, I don't see any questions. Frank, I'm not sure if there are anonymous questions. Okay, maybe Tumani, one more question. I guess we're sister projects. Maybe this is the context, the same Horizon Europe program funded both One Planet and EPIC Africa. But these are different basins, and perhaps the context of regional coordination was your question. If you could say a little bit more about the kind of the East Africa region and how you're talking about developmental coordination, maybe to give an example would be nice. There I see Jacob Baraza. I think I know who that is. Could you please unmute yourself and
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Yes, Jacob.
Yes, thank you very much, Tumaini, for that great presentation. I just have one quick question.
Yes,
I realize that you talk about the national policies, but you also have the international frameworks. How does this play out, given the fact that at times you realize that, yes, the national might be aligned to the international, but that could also not be the case. But again, like in the case of East Africa, we have the East African community, which then the countries are expected to align and also see that whatever is agreed at that level is also implemented at the grassroots level. What was your finding, or what have you observed?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So what we have seen in the East Africa, in the Lake Victoria Basin, is there's, of course, three levels: the national level, the basin level, then the larger region level, meaning there is the Kenyan level, there is the Lake Victoria Basin, then there is the East Africa Community. The biggest incoherence from policy to practice emanates from different policy objectives and policy goals between the national and the regional. Meaning, for example, in the case of Kenya, where there is high, in the case of the Lake Victoria Basin, where the National Adaptation Plan for Kenya seeks to diversify energy into geothermal and renewables, and substantially expand hydropower, then what this means also, it means there is an increased use for or competition for water in Kenya between hydro, geothermal, and agriculture expansion. So at the national scale, there is first a problem or an incoherence problem between the national level and the county level. So Kenya has a devolved governance system where we have the national government and we have the county government. And the county government is implied or most of the times argued as the local level of governance or as the grassroots level of governance. While in cases of energy production or energy pricing, the Kenya Energy Corporation, the utility that is responsible for supplying energy, does not necessarily align to the laws that are provided for by the county governments. So this already creates a very incoherent pricing mechanism and ambitions on if to develop newer or expand the energy distribution production. But also, what also works is there's a very high level of coordination between the national government and the utilities, and the national government most of the times ensures that the friction or the incoherence between utilities or authorities and grassroots level is mitigated for or is accommodated in the national standards. So the slide that has institution norms and standards and regulations. So Jacob, to answer your question, is in our case study, we linked development goals or development programs that are regional, that is within the East Africa region. And we selected predetermined development frameworks agreed at the level of East Africa Community. Then at the basin level scale, we wanted to understand the trends, how the expansion of the nexus at the national scale affects the coordination at the basin scale. So this is where we got a lot of incoherence between the vertical and horizontal coherence scales, whereby a government policy is contradicting a regional level objective. But then again, to come to your question also, Prof. Edo. So why development is working in the East Africa Development Corporation is there is a very strong institutional arrangement that liberates, that creates a sort of loop between the national levels and the regional levels, especially in development, such that if Kenya has surplus or Tanzania has surplus in food production, then it can easily be channeled into the East African market without necessarily having to go through a policy, a regulation process, or an institutional arrangement process. So the development part of it in the East Africa region at the East African level is quite robust, quite strong, and it has built on previous cases of shifting or looping the coexistence between when there is overproduction or production beyond the national demand or underproduction, meaning at any point one country has production that is higher, they can easily supply the surplus without subjecting themselves to an institutional process, which often takes a very long time.
Thank you, Tumani. I think we'll come back to you. I think definitely I see questions on the role of power pools and developmental corridor initiatives and so on that we will come back to you on.
Sure.
With my eyes on the time, I think we have a second speaker, so I would like to thank you again, Tumani, and I would like to invite Eric to give his presentation. Thank you. Eric, please introduce yourself briefly before doing so.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Erik Klaas. I work at VITO, which is the Flemish Institute for Technological Research in Belgium. We are a partner in the Epic Africa project led by Ido. At VITO, I work at a group which is called VITO Nexus. And we apply the transition management framework to questions of development. I think this framework was introduced during the last webinar by my colleague Yves De Weerdt. But very briefly, it means that we look at issues such as governance from a long-term perspective, from also a multi-level perspective, and also an interdisciplinary perspective. And today I'm going to talk about what we did in the Epic Africa project on devising kind of a new governance analysis, a web governance analysis tool. Will you share the slides, Frank, or will I?
You can share your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
If you put it on the slide mode.
Yes. Like this?
Excellent.
Okay. Like I said, I'm going to talk about a WEF nexus governance analysis approach. And this has just been published about a week ago in the journal Environmental Science and Policy. And the good thing is that you can freely access the article until June 18th. Everything that I will tell today is explained in more detail in this article. So you are, of course, very much invited to have a look at it. So what is the key point of what we try to do with this WEF governance analysis method is that we tried to move in a nutshell from, let's say, the very complex and very theoretical WEF nexus approaches that you often find in literature, and we try to make it into a really practical method that really shows you where you can intervene in this WEF nexus system for obtaining transition results. So why this matters, I think there's a bit of repetition here with the previous speaker. So of course, in the two cases that we look at in the Epic Africa project, which is the Volta River Basin and the Tana River Basin, we see that issues of water supply, of electricity production, of agriculture, and impact on ecosystems are very much related to each other, and that is mainly, or one of the big factors in that is, of course, the fact that a lot of the electricity production and irrigation depends on dams. These dams are also used for flood control, so you can easily see that sometimes, for instance, in times of drought or in times of heavy rains, that this can lead to conflicts in the coordination of these different demands for water. And so the question, or the WEF Nexus governance question, is how do we plan for governing this water resource so that these conflicts do not arise, or arise minimally in the future, especially in the future, since in the Epic Africa project we look at long time frames. We look at the horizon of 2063. So of course, then climate change also becomes a very important factor into this question that we have to take into account. Now, as already said, there is already a huge amount of literature on WEF Nexus governance, theoretical literature. And when we were screening this literature, so of course, we are applying this transition governance approach in the Volta and the Tana River Basin. So of course, our first step here was that we try to understand how WEF Nexus governance worked in these contexts. And so we screened the existing literature, and we found that it is very heavily focusing on mapping the system links between the water system, between the agricultural system, between the energy system. And there are also a lot of approaches that tell you how to identify, for instance, trade-offs between the trade-offs that are being made in the policies that govern these systems. For instance, the coherence analysis is one of them. But then the missing step is often how these theoretical insights based on system analysis, how they translate into actual recommendations that fit into the governance system that is already in place. And also, often these existing approaches, they are very, they depend very much on a high level of data availability, and also they are very resource intensive in the sense that a lot of man hours needs to go into the analysis. And as you see, the previous speaker is doing a PhD on this, so I think this is very much an illustration of what we wanted to show. So what we try to make is not so much a new approach, but we took from the existing approaches those parts that are less, let's say, resource intensive, and try to put it together into a three-step approach that can also be applied together with stakeholders, to show them really where starting from a WEF Nexus analysis, where the intervention points can be for better WEF Nexus governance. And basically, the three big steps are there. That the first one is that we start with one concrete Nexus challenge. So first step, we make a matrix of the different interactions between the resource systems, ecosystems, water, agriculture, and energy. And so in this matrix, you see where the possible trade-offs are. And then together with, based on interviews and stakeholder interactions, we select one concrete Nexus challenge. This, of course, is to avoid a bit this overload in a complete WEF nexus system analysis where everything is connected to everything. And then for this one challenge, we take the applicable policy documents, and there we do the screening, like the previous speaker talked about. So we screen for policy coherence, but also here, so we screen national policy documents, I have to say. So I will show the example what we did for Kenya, for the Tana River Basin. And we screen them mainly on strategic coherence. And then through this screening, we try to reveal where the most important conflicts are, but also where the most important points are, where you have win-win situations. So where policies from different policy domains reinforce each other. And then once we have these, so for the points where we have conflicts or trade-offs or interactions that are not addressed, we try to trace the governance architecture. So meaning how are decisions made into these areas from the planning to the implementation stage. And we look for points where we can intervene in this process. So again, instead of trying to propose something new out of the blue, we try to work within existing arrangement and also with stakeholders that work within these existing arrangements to try to find interventions that make sense to them. So this is all a bit, theoretical background of this paper. So as I said, we have applied this to both the Volta River Basin and the Tana River Basin. I will here talk about the example of the Tana River Basin, which is also the example that is used in the published article. So yeah, Tana River Basin, very important for Kenyan economy. It provides 80% of Nairobi's water, over 70% of hydropower, 7 million livelihoods are supported, etc. So it's a very important basin for the Kenyan economy, and of course a good test case for the method that we developed, so to speak. Okay, so let's now see how the 3 steps that I have outlined, how we have applied them to this case. So in the first step, as I said, we try to avoid this whole system, this analytical overload that you get when you try to investigate all the possible connections between water, energy, agriculture, and ecosystems. So we selected one specific challenge, of course, based on the input of stakeholders. And then the first thing that we do is to make a biophysical map of this particular challenge. So the particular challenge that we addressed was the possible trade-offs between demand for agricultural products and ecosystem challenges. And so this, what you see here is a typical causal loop diagram that we made, which clearly shows just the resource interactions or the physical processes that happen within this resource system in a format that we believe is very much understandable for all stakeholders involved in this system. And so you see basically 2 big loops, the demand driven by the demand for agricultural products, which drives the demand for cultivated land, and then this demand for cultivated land has an impact, of course, on land use changes and deforestation. This deforestation in turn has an impact on water quality through the soil erosion. And on the other hand, if you have more demand for cultivated land, you of course have more need for water, for irrigation, and this has an impact on the dam operations that have to be operated as well for electricity production as for irrigation. And it also has an impact, of course, on the power needed for this irrigation. So as you can see, causal loop diagram, it's a very, so we also have used it in a workshop setting. So this is very, a very useful tool to work together with stakeholders. So once we have this challenge mapped, we checked for the policy coherence. So you have the 5 policy domains that have an impact on the way the resources in this challenge are used. So this is done through basic document screening and coding. And so what we compared are the policy objectives and the targets. They are compared again in a kind of a matrix setting, so between each of those domains. And then we coded them mainly as being supportive. Yeah, so for instance, one water policy that supports the energy policy and vice versa, or a contradictory, or as mainly non-interacting. Of course, we are also aware that in the literature there are many more sophisticated scoring procedures available on more detailed scales. But again, our method that we made here is supposed to be used as kind of a high-level screening tool to identify where the most important or glaring trade-offs or contradictions are happening. So we chose to have just these 3 categories: supportive, non-interacting, or contradictory. And then finally, like I said, the most important point of the methodology is that it's supposed to be something practicable, so that it has to lead to implementation, to practical points of interventions within the existing governance arrangements. This is in the final step. We try to connect these conflicts or these synergies to points where you could intervene in the implementation of actual policies. And to do that, we again screened what we've called the governance architecture. So how in these policy domains do we move from planning to execution of the policies, and where are there points where, for instance, official coordination mechanisms are in place or not. So what's the result of this? So you see, even with this, let's say, simplified method, there's a lot of interactions that need to be screened between these policy domains. And so we found just for this one WEF nexus challenge, so the nexus between agriculture and impact on ecosystem, we found 7 explicit trade-offs. So where there is a possible conflict in the policy documents, but also fortunately synergies. To give just one example of a possible trade-off is the one that we found in the policy documents between food security, so agricultural production for inland purposes, for food for the national population, and export, food for cash crops and export. Another one is, of course, that the land use change that is of course induced by this demand for agricultural products and the strains that it puts on ecosystems. An example of an explicit synergy is that we found is the policy to use the development of multi-purpose dams, so to use them both for electricity production and irrigation. Even though that, so that's also something that was raised by the previous speaker. So we found this synergy in policy documents, but later on also in stakeholder interactions. Stakeholders told us that sometimes in practice the priority was still given to electricity production. And so if we discuss then these results that we found on the trade-offs or the possible conflicts, we could use these insights to discuss about possible practical interventions within existing institutions or organizations. For instance, in the water sector, there is a very detailed section on implementation matrices. So water policy, what are the roles, who takes up which role in the implementation process. So this is very much detailed over there, and that could also be an inspiration for the other sectors, for instance. Coordination could also be used, taking inspiration from Land Use Council and using the existing interministerial bodies for water-sensitive land decisions. So to make the link between land use and the water sector. Existing climate institutions that, for instance, report to the UNFCCC could also be used as a fora where the coordination issues are discussed, etc. So the main point is we do not want to stop mainly at the point where we have identified the possible conflicts and the possible synergies, and then just say, yeah, you need to coordinate more. But the point of the method is that we think it also helps to identify where exactly coordination can be embedded within existing institutions. So if I have to sum it up in one sentence, what we try to do or what we try to show is that with Nexus governance does not require you to build a whole new system from scratch, a whole new governance system from scratch, but it can be an inspiration to use the existing institutions in a better way. So yeah, that's the main takeaway message. And of course, you are always welcome to pose further questions here or by mail through this mail address.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. I think we are scheduled to end now, and I think just to be generous to everyone who's here, whoever can stay a bit longer, if Tumani and Eric can make a few more minutes. Yes, Tumani, John as well.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
No problem.
Yes. So I open this up to the audience. So if anybody has a question or a comment, please raise your hand. In the meantime, maybe I pose one point to Eric. So really nicely, already when you were showing your nexus trade-offs and conflicts on the causal loop diagram, and I saw NDCs there, land use conflicts kind of connecting with NDCs. So thought made me think about Tumani John's work, of course. And then you also mentioned at some point, of course, we focused on national policy documents as a starter, and I wondered if as Tumani John has shown, there's kind of misalignment of regional objectives with national or county level objectives, whether it would be interesting to look at also more East African regional policy documents. Of course, it would cause complexity, it will increase complexity, but maybe not. Maybe these, as Tumani John said, these regional bodies are very able institutions. Could the two of you reflect on this? Maybe I start with you, Eric. What would it say about this 4-stage process or coordination, or can you maybe interject there?
So as I said, we looked at the Tana River Basin and the analysis that we did of national policies mainly as a case study. So the method we developed was something new. So we wanted to test it on a case, and the case, of course, was selected because we were in the EPIC Africa project. But it can be applicable also to regional institutions. It's not limited to just national instruments. So we can go down. As we mentioned in the discussion section of our paper, one of the limitations of the method is that for now we have done just a screening of the national policy documents, but as we know, the governance in Kenya is highly devolved to the counties. And so we would need to specify what our findings for this particular challenge, for instance, also mean for governance on the county level. So it's, of course, WEF Nexus governance is very complex. We try to simplify it a bit with our method, but the price you pay for the simplification is that you also lose a bit of the details. So I can acknowledge that, but it would, I think it would be interesting for Mr. Tumani John if you could also have a look at this method and tell us what you think about it, and I'm happy to have a dialogue with you and see how we could apply it to this multi-country setting that you have. I think this would be very, very fruitful. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you couldn't summarize it better, Eric, because then the challenge with going from national to regional and regional to national comes with the scale and complexity. For example, let's say Kenya has 5 river basins within itself. So what, and I think we will continue this discussion further with you and Edo and the rest of the team. What would be interesting is looking at this work. First, we look at the 5 basins in Kenya. Then we have a very solid understanding of one of the biggest user of the transboundary resources in East Africa region. Then we will also have a very good reflection point to do also within the nexus, which sectors within the nexus is more regional, meaning the region, the East Africa region, and what is more national and what is more devolved. But then also now from the regional to national level, that's where they have the regional level is tied on the broader macros like development, like climate mitigation and adaptation. So there, what is there existing, what is working is at the broader scale. What you miss here again is the nitty-gritties of understanding what happens in the 9 river basins in Tanzania and the 5 river basins in Tanzania. So of course, Eric and Edo, we will discuss this further, because I really like this methodology, and I think it also avoids the proliferation of too many new complex systems. We are making too many new tools, and often that's why they remain to be so theoretical. So these has the potential to build on what is working and keep on making it as complex as possible, as long as we are making it complex from practice, not from theory this time around.
Thank you, Tumani. John, I still don't see some hands, or Frank, I'm not sure if there are anonymous questions. But in the meantime,
Yes.
Yeah, are there questions?
No, not yet.
Okay. So Eric, if I go back to the methodology you presented, the framework, where the nice simplicity of it is, it starts with a problem, huh? So stakeholder, originating or consulted problem as an entry point. And it was quite interesting that you looked at, or you showed the one on competition for land, from demands on food. And Tumani, of course, you talk about the regional power pool, and more specifically also the agricultural, the African free trade zone in the IGAD region, kind of free trade and lack of friction. So yeah, so I was just wondering when I heard the presentation also, sort of in the methodology Eric presented, the entry point has that problem. But of course, if you look at a regional scale, free trade zone may mean actually food security regionally. Maybe that is. Yeah, I was just reflecting. Maybe that is also something to think about. I'm not sure how to think about that, but if you have a reflection on that, what it means for the methodology, or and I'm not looking for an answer, but yeah. Tumani, please.
This is what the methodology that Eric presents is also, we need also to, normally problem in the domain has been understood to be something that is undermining. But actually in practice, for example, if you look at understanding why development is working and coordination is not working, but both of them are working, is the practice problem. So what Eric and this methodology, what I find very interesting about this methodology is to understand, wait, nationally we have these types of entry problems, which is competitive resource use, but regionally we have a very big willingness to open the markets for free food and trade between nations. So what does this really mean for availability of arable land, expansion of arable land in the national scales, competition of available water resources? And what also this means is this could also be an underlying implicit synergy that indeed from the success of the regional economically oriented commitments, there is also an opportunity to understand the different national profiles at different cases. If you're looking at, for example, IGAD, different preferences or priorities nationally that contribute not necessarily to undermining, but to increasing the robustness of availability of data for scenario planning. So if you have all this openness, then you end up having a very good amount or data set to help clean your problem using Eric's methodology, then you can identify clearly. We start with the problem is availability of water, but we have to start with the synergies of using or reusing water in a different way.
Thanks Tumani. Eric.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think the question that you raised, Ido, is that I think our methodology could respond to that in the sense that we start from a resource system and the biophysical links. So the example that we showed is the Tana Basin, where much of the resource is used within Kenya, like I showed in the picture. So this of course then points to the national policies as the main policy documents. But if you have a resource system that is used to by many different countries, then of course this leads to an analysis of the policy documents of these different countries. So the method in itself does not say that it's only applicable to a national context. It starts from a resource system and causes a loop diagramming of how the resource circulates, without specifying that it should be used within one country or one county or whatever. So it can be flexibly adapted, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Frank, do we have any more questions or comments to our speakers?
No, not for now. So
Okay.
let's hope that they get some more
Yes.
questions.
Okay, great. So I have to again thank our speakers, Tumani John and Eric Lass. Yeah, we really appreciate this talk and discussion. And with that, I think we close our session. And so please reach out to Tumani John and Eric. Yeah, and they will be able to respond. The papers are free, links are shared. Maybe in our communication, Mahmoud will reshare this with the attendees. So yeah, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.